Hey guys, this is the video to help you with your lesson 8.3. But before we start 8.3, I need to recap and review real quick from the previous lesson. We talked about sine, cosine, and tangent, the basic trig functions, and we use those to find missing parts of a right triangle. Okay, so we said the sine function of an angle, we'll call it x. So the sine of x is opposite over hypotenuse. So, S-O-H, so cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. That's ca, C-A-H, so ca, and then toa. So tangent is always opposite over adjacent. Okay, so like I said, we use these when we were missing a side of a triangle, trying to find a side, and we were given an angle. So for example, if we had like an angle that was 20 degrees, we could say sine of 20, and let's suppose we were missing the opposite, so we'll call that x, and let's suppose the hypotenuse was like 10. Okay, so we said you could multiply both sides by 10. This is how we solved in the last lesson. So I have just x on this side, and now I'm going to grab a calculator and type in the sine of 20. So remember, my calculator is backwards, so I type 20 sine and then times 10, and I would get approximately 3.4 for x. Okay, so that's how we did problems in the last lesson when we are missing a side. All right, in the lesson 8.3, the one we're going to look at in this video, we're missing an angle. Okay, so we're actually going to use the inverse trig functions. Okay, so if you look on your calculator, you're going to be looking, instead of sine, usually right above it, and it's a secondary function, or you may have to press the second key or the shift key, but you'll see sine to the -1 power, cosine to the -1 power, tangent to the -1 power. These are all called inverse trig functions. Okay, and we use these when missing an angle. Okay, so we'll work through some of these together. I just want to show you on my calculator. This may be kind of hard to see. I don't know if I can zoom in without losing focus, but we'll try. So on this calculator, just above the sine button, you have sine to the -1, cosine to the -1 is right above cosine, and tan to the -1 is right above tangent. So to use these, because on my calculator they're yellow, I would use the shift button first, just like on a keyboard on a computer. So I would type in shift, and then if I wanted inverse sine, I would press sine button after I press shift, so on and so forth. So let's look together at the first page of your, let me zoom back out, first page of your lesson 8.3. Okay, so this is 8.3, and this talks about inverse functions like I just told you, but let's look at number 1 together. So we have a missing angle that we're trying to find, and from that angle we're given the side adjacent, the side opposite, and the hypotenuse. So that means it's a sine problem. Sine, opposite, hypotenuse. So I'm going to write sine of x, because that's the unknown, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So I have sine of x is equal to 15 over 24. Okay, now to solve these, over here I have sine x. Well, the opposite of sine is inverse sine. So if I do quote, and I'm not really going to do anything on that side, but if I quote do the inverse operation, it should cancel out the operation. So when I have inverse sine, this is just going to cancel out, right? But and I'll be left with just x on the left side. On the right side, however, I need to actually do, and I'll use my calculator for this, inverse sine 15 over 24. Okay, now this will look different on different calculators. This is the only one I have at my house right now, so I'm going to use this one to show you. So for this Casio calculator, I'm going to type in 15 over, and I use the division sign for that, 24, and I get decimal 0.65. Okay, now that's already on my screen, so I'm just going to press Shift Sine, which is really inverse sine because I pressed Shift first, and that gives me that x is approximately 38.7 degrees. Okay, so we're able to approximate the angles using the inverse trig functions. Okay, so it's kind of like the opposite of what we did in lesson 8.2. Now you can see here I just rounded to the tenths place. In my calculator I had 38.682 and so on. I just rounded that to something more manageable. Alright, let's look at number 2. So for number 2, I'm given the side adjacent to x and the hypotenuse, which tells me this is a cosine problem. So cosine x equals 8 over 11. Okay, so I'm going to do the inverse cosine on both sides. So that would leave me with just x over here because that'll cancel out, equals inverse cosine of 8 over 11. Okay, so once again, I'll go back to my calculator. 8 over 11 gives me this decimal number, and then I'm going to press Shift cosine, which gives me the inverse cosine button, and I get approximately 43.3. So x is approximately 43.3 degrees. Make sure you put that degree symbol because here we're actually finding angles. Okay, number 3 is clearly, because I'm missing the hypotenuse, is clearly a tangent problem. So I'll put tan of x. Now let's see if we can do this right. We're supposed to have opposite over adjacent. The side opposite x is 20, and the side adjacent is 37. Okay. So once again, this is an inverse problem. To solve this, when I'm looking for an angle, I'm going to do the inverse. So x is the inverse tan of 20 over 37. So we go back to the calculator. I type in 20 divided by 37, and then Shift tan. It gives me about 28.4 degrees. X is approximately 28.4 degrees. Okay, these are pretty simple, largely done just using a calculator. So I'm going to leave 4, 5, and 6 for you to do there. Okay. Now, when you get down to number 7, this is just a little review. This goes back, and there's some problems from the previous lesson where we were missing a side. I'm going to do one of those just as a review, and so you can kind of see the difference in what we were doing and what we just what we had been doing previously. So here I'm missing a side, so this is not an inverse problem. I'm given these two sides are opposite and adjacent of 39. I'm missing a hypotenuse, so I know this is a tan problem. So tangent of 39, right? I'm given the angle, so I'm going to write it here next to the angle, is equal to 11 over x. That's opposite over adjacent, and I'm looking for x. Okay, so for this problem, I would need to multiply both sides by x to get x out from under the out of the denominator. These two cancel, so I have x tan 39 equals 11. Now I'm going to divide both sides by tan 39. Okay, so they cancel over here, and I'm left with just x equals 11 over tan 39, and I can go to my calculator and type in 11. Now I'm going to use parentheses. It's very important here to put in parentheses because I have like more than one thing going in with the tan 39. So 11 divided by parentheses 39 tangent close parentheses equals, and then it'll do that division. Okay, and I get about 13.6. X is approximately 13.6. So notice that on number 7 I used just the regular tangent key, and then back on number 3 was also a tan problem, but because I was missing an angle here, I used the inverse function. So when you're missing a side, you use the tangent function. When you're missing an angle, you're going to use the inverse function like we learned in this video. Okay, now the rest of this lesson is just some more practice of these. I would recommend just doing a few more of these of the new kind, just so you're familiar. When I say new kind, I mean the inverse problems, so that you're familiar with the difference in the two. I just think a little more practice on that would probably be a good idea.